All right, guys, so we're going to talk about shot placement today, and I'm going to talk about true low-hanging fruit. And I mean true low-hanging fruit, where all you got to do is watch this video, and you are going to avoid serious issues with not recovering elk that you've shot. And this is going to cover some rifle scenarios and some archery scenarios. Unfortunately, the cold, hard truth is that on the archery front, somewhere around 50% of hit bulls are not recovered. On the rifle front, somewhere around 20-25% of bulls are not recovered that are hit. Across the spectrum of different types of elk hunting, from wilderness stuff to private ranches, all of those worlds, the data set will tell you the same thing. But there are a segment of hunters that do way better than other hunters. And a big chunk of that is knowledge. And we're going to focus on some of that right here. In particular, two scenarios that make a huge difference if you just understand the anatomy of the animal, you understand the angle a little bit, and then you think about it. You need to visualize the actual anatomy because it does make a big difference in terms of shot placement, right? Because what's happening on a big chunk of these elk that are not recovered is people aren't actually missing. People are hitting exactly where they aimed, or at least within the grouping of where they aimed, right? So it's not that they have equipment failure or buck fever or some other issue, right? It's that they literally hit where they were aiming, and aiming was not where they should have aimed. First, the broadside bull elk. This is a true broadside bull elk, and I'm going to say this multiple times during this video. Almost never is this actually the situation that arises out in the field, all right? Because typically out in the field, for sure when you're archery hunting, the bull is almost never broadside. He's always slightly quartering to you. And oh no, I am going to tell you how to shoot a bull that's slightly quartering to you in the archery situation. Because a lot of people say never take that shot, right? Well, the reality is 95% of the shots that people take as a bow hunter, when they say that they took a broadside shot, they actually took a slight quartering to shot. That's just the facts. And the reason is when you call in bulls, they're coming to you. You know, they're giving you a frontal, and that's for another video, but they're giving you a frontal or they're giving a quartering to shot to you as they approach. And a lot of times they're gonna skim off you because they're all of a sudden starting to be wary. If you got your setup right, they're starting to go wind you, and now they're quartering a little bit, right? They're quartering as they go to wind you. So you're getting that quartering to shot a ton. Now the thing about it is, people think it's this. People think it's a broadside shot. So the first thing you got to understand what a broadside shot actually looks like. And if you just analyze the situation, it'll be very clear to you. But there are a couple anatomical things that you can think about. Can you see the far side of this bull's rump, right? You can't, right? You can't see the roundness of his tail dock. That's because he's perfectly perpendicular to you. He's perfectly broadside. Up in his front, you can't see the cream color of his far shoulder. That's because he's perfectly perpendicular to you. He's perfectly broadside. As an example, look at this bull. 90% of hunters are going to see this, particularly if they're in the actual hunting scenario, and they're going to be like, broadside bull, shoot him. Okay, I'm not going to argue that you shouldn't shoot this bull, but I will argue that he's not broadside. Look, cream color of his far side shoulder here, and you can see that you're only seeing a little bit of his tail, right? So his butt's back and that far shoulder is kinked to you, right? This bull is quartering to. He's slightly quartering to. You have to know that in the archery situation, or you're gonna shoot in the wrong spot. So let's back up to the broadside bull. I'm gonna show you the anatomy real quick so you understand the anatomy, and then we'll come back to this bull so we know exactly where to shoot. I can tell you right now off the bat, shooting right here in the crease or even a little bit of a smidge in front of the crease is wrong. That's not the optimal shot. All right, guys, in some of my content, you're gonna see that I've been using this chest holster from Invader Concepts. This is with my 10mm. I also use it with my Glock 19 and even a PMR 30. I'm gonna do a bunch of content here in the next couple months on that around bear defense. It should be interesting. It looks a little awkward to have your gun under your bino harness, but if you test out all the different variations, it is the best and you have it on you all the time. I do have a discount code. It's CliffG, and it's for 10% off. Go check them out. A lot of us come into this with the mindset of we're gonna heart shoot this bull, right? And his heart is right here in his armpit, right at that crease. So contemplate where my crosshairs are right now, right? This is the natural spot where a lot of archers and rifle guys are gonna shoot on broadside bulls. Here's the anatomy of a bull. This is very, very close to anatomically correct. And I wanna comment on this app that I'm using, guys. I've got permission to use it on here. This is the bow hunting simulator app. It's on iPhone, it's on Android. You can get it, I think it's like $4. I have no relationship with the developer. I make no money if you use it, but it's a very good resource because you can simulate all the different angles, all the different shots. It's gonna seem a little corny when I get into the weeds on this, like what is he doing? He's using a little bow hunter game. It's not a game, it's just a 3D depiction of these animals, and then you can throw shots through the animal with your bow. You can basically, I mean, it's bow hunting simulator, but it doesn't matter. It's just showing you the flight path of the projectile. So it works for rifle too, right? You can use it for that too. I have literally used this app after I lost a bull that I had the shot videoed, looked exactly at the situation, depicted in this app, shot the arrow in the app, and looked at exactly what happened. Looked at what happened in the field. Yep, that's not lung blood, that's liver blood. Now I know exactly what happened. So this app is very handy on that front. I want to mention that. You know, any bow hunter should use it. You can learn a lot. You can basically get this first part of this deal out of the way, just learning the knowledge and the thought process by getting that app and just doing just changing the angle of the animal constantly, throwing a bunch of arrows through it, and then understanding the anatomy of the animal, and then taking that and be diligent about visualizing the anatomy in real world hunting situations. So that's my spiel on the app, even though nobody's paying me anything. It's a good resource, and I'm gonna use it through this video. A lot of us are thinking about this crease right here. Our thought process with the crease should change because the crease is right here, right? And sure, that heart is there, that's great. We have the heart there, right? And hitting the heart would be great. But the reality is the heart is a pretty small area, and it doesn't matter if we're shooting a rifle or a bow, we're going to have a group, right? Regardless of how good we are at this, we're gonna have a group, and sometimes randomly we're gonna hit the edge of that group, sometimes we're gonna hit the center of that group. It's probably fairly close to a Gaussian normal distribution, but there's still spread, right? When you look at a piece of the vitals on an elk, like the heart, the problem with that is we aim at that. If we slightly miss, we can be off the heart, right? We can be off here, and then if we miss just a little bit more than slight, we can be in the guts, we can be in the liver, right? And that's on a broadside bull. So when we look at this, we think to ourselves, well, where can we give ourselves the most room for error? The biggest vital on an elk that's gonna kill the elk is both lungs, right? Look at those lungs right there. They're huge compared to the heart, right? So we want to destroy both of those lungs. I'm going to get into this deeper here in a moment, but on those lungs, we've got to hit both of them. So on the broadside bull, it's pretty self-explanatory. It's not really playing in, but it will in a minute, so I might as well explain it, right? The way you kill these elk with a bow, 90% of the time, well, maybe 85% of the time, because we're going to factor in some frontal shooting here too, but 85% of the time, it's that arrow going through both lungs and the bull not being able to get away because of that. He's going to bleed out. That's how the bull is going to end up dying, is he's going to bleed out, right? Because we've wrecked both of those lungs, but because he doesn't have the usage of those both lungs, he's not going to get very far before he bleeds out. Bulls that have an arrow through both lungs, in my experience, and this is like in the hundreds of elk, and everybody else who kind of has that type of data set will tell you the same thing. Arrow through both lungs, dead bull within 100 yards, almost without exception. So if somebody is telling you that they double lunged a bull and they didn't find it, or they tracked blood for 150 yards and then lost the bull, they're most likely full of shit. Sure, there can be exceptions, but generally that's the case. And that includes if there's no exit. If you shoot a bull through the near side lung and go through the far side lung and bury that broadhead into the far shoulder blade, you're still gonna find that bull within 100, 150 yards, dead, bled out, toast. The problem arises if you only hit one of those. And I'll talk a little bit more of that when we get into the quartering shot, but the short of it is, there's multiple issues there. One, bull's not going to bleed out as quickly because you don't have as much damage through that cavity where there's the lungs that bleed like crazy, but also a bunch of vascular stuff, right? So you don't have that. The other issue is that they have one operational lung, and in the mountains, in the terrain that a lot of us are hunting elk, they can get really far away, like far away enough that there becomes so many directions that they can go, and eventually you will lose blood. There becomes so many exponentially more avenues that they can go to, the recovery rate goes way, way down. I personally think that single-lunged bulls with archery equipment, way less than 20% of them are recovered. I think it may be single digits of those bulls are recovered. And I'll get into that a little bit more. There's another factor that comes in to play there, and that's that double-lunged bulls go downhill. 100% of the time, a double-lunged bull will go downhill. He might go up for a little bit with a couple quick breaths of air that he gets out of those damaged lungs as they deflate. But if that arrow goes through both lungs, goes through the medium sternum, which is that fleshy barrier between the two lungs, you puncture that, you puncture both lungs, that bull might go up slightly, but for the most part, he's going down to die. Down. Now, the thing about it is when you're in the mountains, if you know an animal has to go down, tracking job becomes exponentially easier because you can limit the paths that they're going to go, they're going to take. So you limit all that, you're way more likely to find them. Of course, you're combining this with the fact that they're going to be within 150 yards. No problem, right? With one lung, they can go up, and that exponentially increases the ways they can get away from you, the places they can go, and your ability to track them goes way, 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 way down. All right, so what am I getting at? What I'm getting at is you got to factor this in to broadside placement. Guys, biltong, okay? I have been obsessed with this stuff for 3 or 4 years. Ever since I got on a keto, carnivore, paleo-esque type of diet, I've had a hard time finding healthy snacks. Biltong is a great option, particularly the slabs that have this fat on the side. That's where your energy is if you're a fat burner like me. Super simple ingredients in this, guys. Literally 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ingredients. Compare that to your gas station jerky. A great snack in the backcountry or just day to day. Biltong Depot is a huge supporter of my content. Go to their website, biltongdepot.com. Use my code CliffGray, CLIFFGRAY at checkout for 10% off and to support this content. Thanks, guys. We're gonna aim essentially in this area because in this area, we have the most room for error, right? Because we're in the front half of the lungs, we have a much wider group that we can shoot that's going to result in a dead animal within 100 yards, right? So we're not going to heart shoot the animal because that exposes us to all this junk back here with our group. And then as we introduce angle, it becomes very, very relevant to that single lung shot. We're going to shoot right here. Everybody is afraid of this. Everybody is afraid of this out there who's consuming YouTube content or hunting content. And I'll tell you why. Everybody is afraid of that front shoulder, and in particular, they're afraid of this part of the front shoulder because it's a big, almost softball size type of, big round joint there that, yes, an arrow is going to have a hard time penetrating, and because of the shape of it, you get weird deflection off of it, and when you hit that thing, it sucks because it's a thud sound, you get no penetration, arrow hanging way out. It's a sickening feeling, right? And the thing about it is, visually, it looks horrible, right? So you don't see a lot of that depicted, right? Or you surely don't see a lot of it depicted in any way close to being a positive way. The problem is the far back shot, right? So the shot where the guy's heart shooting, but hits right in here, right? Hits right there behind the crease. Let me show you that on the actual animal. Hits right here behind the crease, right? Just misses the heart slightly behind it, or maybe he's above the heart, misses anything important vascularly. If that bull is angled at all, and I'm going to show you this in a minute, if that bull is angled at all, it's still going to look like a beautiful shot. You're going to see the arc of the arrow on the YouTube video. You're going to see it bury into the fletchings into the bull, right? You're going to see a complete pass through, arrow go through the other side. Glorious shot. Aspens in the back, beautiful Montana, Wyoming, Colorado landscape. It's incredible, right? And they called into this bull into the perfect setup, beautiful shot. Those sort of videos are all over YouTube. I can promise you, because I've looked through a lot of them and having the experience watching a lot of these bulls get hit, particularly as they quarter to you as they're approaching these archery setups. I can tell you for a fact, a lot of those videos that you see that look glorious, the bulls are single lunged and they're never recovered. But they're still shown because it's passed through, it looks perfect, looks like an awesome scenario. So this creates a giant bias because everybody is deathly afraid of the thump of the shoulder hit. And so they tend to just naturally aim a little far back, right? And so broadside again, this can be functionally an issue because we're giving up the fact that we have all this room to have a big wide group, right? And that sucks. That's where we want to shoot. But on the actual elk, that's like shooting in here, right? On this bull, that's like shooting right here, right? Inside that V, okay? And so you have to do that. You're basically gonna feel like on a broadside bull, back third of the leg above that right in here. That is the most forgiving spot for a broadside bull. Now, we got to talk about quartering because quartering changes the game on this. And this is where it becomes very important to understand this anatomy. All right, so this is our bull that's slightly quartering to us. Again, most people are going to call this broadside as this bull comes in to a archery setup, right? A call-in setup. And most guys are going to say, okay, I'll shoot right here at the crease or maybe slightly in front of it, right? Let's go to our app, this bow hunting simulator, and I'm going to show you this exact shot. I'm going to set it up in the simulator so you can see the exact arrow path. All right, so as you can see, the bull is out there pretty much the exact same, just slightly quartering to. If you look at this bull right here, he looks broadside, right? Most people are going to say he's broadside. So again, just get this mantra stuck in your head. Cliff says that bulls are almost never broadside. If you think about that when you're out in the field, you're going to kill more bulls just thinking about that. Because when bulls come in, your first natural response is think, oh, the bull's broadside. You'll be able to think to yourself, no, he's probably not. And then you'll look again, and you'll be like, oh yeah, he's actually quartering to. I need to adjust my point of aim due to that, right? So let's watch this. Bull slightly quartering to us. Going right to the crease. Going to shoot slightly in front of the crease. Right there, slightly in front of the crease. Arrow, perfect, beautiful arc. Look at that. You see what it says right there? Right lung and liver. That's all we hit, okay? So you saw the shot, right, in the simulator. How many times have you seen that shot across YouTube, across elk hunting videos, right? Probably quite a few times. And I'm telling you, a lot of those bulls are never recovered for this exact reason right here. Nailed the near lung, but we were in the back third of it, missed the heart, came out, guts, liver. Clearly missed that far side lung. There's the path. You could never imagine at 40 yards that you would have that much angle with that bull right there that looks basically broadside. So that is the crux of the issue right there, right? Just slight angles to you, just slight quartering to you. You have to adjust for that or you're never gonna hit that far side lung. And in some cases, it's gonna feel very extreme for you to do that, right? And so let me show you on the bull here where you actually need to aim on these slight quartering twos. All right, so our real picture of the bull here, this is just barely slightly quartering to us, right? A good archer, a guy that knows what he's doing is gonna look at this and he is gonna imagine that knuckle of the shoulder here, the scapula back in here. You can literally look at this bull and you can kind of see the ripple of the scapula right there. Comes down, knuckle right here. A guy with his bow is going to go just right off that right here behind it, right? And he's going to hug close to that, very close to that knuckle. And a lot of people are going to say, Cliff, there's no way you would want to be that close to that knuckle because your group that you shoot with your archery equipment, some of that is going to go over that knuckle, right? And so they're going to always want to go back. And the reason is they're always falsely imagining where that far side lung is. They think they can get away with going further back on the animal. They think that they can get away shooting back here and they're still going to hit that far side lung. Well, I just showed you on the anatomically correct figure just a second ago. I just showed you that if you shoot right here and you're trying to stay off of that big shoulder bone, you're going to miss that far lung by quite a bit, right? And you're going to hit that liver. Sure, maybe you'll get lucky and you'll hit enough vascular stuff in that liver to get the bull to bleed out, and you're going to track him for 200 yards and find him piled up dead. That is the odd time. Most of the times you won't have that. Now here, with the rifle situation, becomes a little bit different, and you can take that shot, and a matter of fact, you can even take into the shoulder because you have a huge advantage right there with the rifle, right? It's going to be pretty obvious, but the first big advantage is you hit bone, you're going to crush the bone. Even with a frangible bullet, you're shooting match bullets or whatever, at a minimum, you're probably going to break that shoulder right there, right? And then, depending on the terminal performance of that bullet, you're also going to get a bunch of penetration, and that penetration is going to be a permanent wound channel that is astronomically different than archery equipment. That's just the case. And that's why, with a rifle, single-lunged bulls typically don't go that far and you recover them. Because instead of having a wound channel that's that big from a broadhead, and keep in mind, that doesn't matter if it is a mechanical head that's this big or a fixed head that's this big, the wound channel is not that whole block, right? It's actually just the cuts in there. When you get a bullet that goes through there and destroys a wound channel and puts a wound channel in an animal that's that big, it's the whole thing. Like, that material is destroyed, right? So you have a way better chance when you get an exit through a liver, even you get exits through the guts, that along that path, you're going to have done enough vascular damage that that bull is still going to die. With archery equipment, it's way less common for you to get lucky like that. So you have to really consider this. So anyways, we shoot right here. I just showed you that doesn't work, right? So we have to realize that our bounds, like the exposed vital area on a bull like this, it is really here. See my crosshairs? To here. So bone here of the shoulder, the knuckle of the bone here, and then here we're missing the far lung. Which one is worse than the other? Well, I mean, yeah, missing the far lung is slightly better because you might get a chance that they bleed out anyways, right? Whereas if you hit the shoulder, you're gonna get no penetration, arrow's gonna crack off, and bull will probably be out there just living his life all the way into rifle season and beyond, right? But the reality is you still have your true vital section is pretty small when the bull is quartering this way, right? So you don't really want to hug either end of that because they're both pretty damn bad solutions. If you feel like you can't hit that small vital section, don't take the shot. So that's the first thing, just thinking about and making that decision. But once you decide you are capable of making that shot, you're making the assumption, depending on the distance, that you can hit a pretty small group. So we want to aim right within the exposed vital section, right? We don't want to miss that lung, and we don't want to hit the bone, so we're going to shoot right here, which to a lot of people is shooting directly into the shoulder in their mind. But let's go ahead and simulate this and see how that works actually with the organs. All right, so here we've got this bull according to his still. Here we're going to shoot much further ahead, almost what feels like is in the shoulder of the bull. I mean, look at that. We're just going to the point of the shoulder, slightly back into that V, releasing our arrow, boom. A lot of guys are going to look at that flight path, and they're going to think, holy shit, did that guy get lucky that he didn't just slam into that shoulder bone and was completely screwed, right? And it just doesn't look like a great shot, but look at what just happened. Left lung, right lung, heart, veins. This bull is dead probably within 20 yards, right? So let's look at what it did to the anatomy. There you go. Near side lung, far side lung, got some good stuff in between, which that's usually just luck, right? But you can see that's what you have to do. But even here, having shot that far forward, look at how close we were on that far lung. It's not like there's a ton of lung behind that arrow. Let's go back there and look at that. See that right there? There's the far lung. Look, there's not a lot of area right there to play with, right? So even though we were hugging that front bone, that front shoulder bone pretty tight, we had to. The vitals exposed were only about that big with that bull quartering to us. So it just proves, here you go, typical archery situation, quartering to bull that most people would call broadside. Not broadside, always keep that in your mind. Cliff always says that. Where do you shoot? Think about the anatomy and think, oh, he's slightly quartering to me. I have got to hug right to that shoulder bone between there and making sure I don't hit that far lung right there. That's the shot. All right, so we can talk about rifle here just for a second, because with a rifle, as I mentioned before, we have a little more space to play with, right? Horizontally in particular, because basically we can hit this bull from here with a rifle all the way back to in here where kind of the end of the bounds on our archery equipment was, and we are going to crush bone, go through both lungs, dead bull, like probably right on the spot within 10-15 yards, right? So anywhere in here, personally, I like to hug further up on the shoulder because I'm gonna hit both shoulders, I'm gonna go through both lungs, everything is good to go. If you do shoot back here, even if you shoot a little bit further back and you only get the one lung, you probably are gonna have the wound channel that's gonna kill the bull, but it can get messy. So don't do that, right? Just what I would always do on thinking about these quartering to bulls, think I wanna aim up here at the point of the shoulder, crush both shoulders, get both lungs. That's the shot with the rifle on the quartering to bull. I do very few endorsement deals and I do no paid reviews because it would affect the type of content, quality of the knowledge I could put out. So an important part of my business model is my membership group. There's paid and free options. I do a weekly live stream there. There is a thriving community of folks that are helping everybody become a better outdoorsman. It doesn't matter if you're a beginner or if you're an expert, there's something there for you. Go join, guys. It helps me out a ton. It's the way to support this content and to support me. I'll see you there. All the info is at pwchuntsquad.com. All right, so I'm gonna dive a little more into the shoulder rifle shot because it's an important one and it leads to some of this exact same dynamic where we hit exactly where we're aiming at, but we don't recover a bull. The high shoulder shot, right? I'm not saying the high shoulder shot is wrong. I'm saying that a lot of people don't shoot where the actual high shoulder is, and that ends up taking us into a bunch of shitty scenarios, right? So I'm gonna dive into that, but I wanna finish up real quick on this quartering to bull. We do have to have bounds on the archery front. What's too much quartering to actually shoot? And what it is this dynamic that I just talked about. When is it that that vital zone closes between the near side lung and the far side lung and slipping it in there behind the shoulder where we no longer have any reasonable zone to stick that arrow, right? Well, one answer is it's just your group, right? And your skill set and your equipment. How far can you shoot this target? How far can you shoot this target? You know, so you have to judge that, right? It's just, you know, it's just like factoring into everything else, but there is a point where it's basically impossible to kill a bull if he quarters too much. And I would say that this is what that generally looks like. When you get into this sort of quartering, don't shoot at the bull, right? At this point, you're much better off looking into hopefully getting a full-on square to you frontal shot, because there, the vital section is actually much bigger than this shot. A matter of fact, the vital section on a full-on frontal square to you position is, you know, it's like a little bit smaller than a volleyball. That's a pretty good metric to use. That is quite a bit bigger than your bull that's even slightly quartering to you if you really look at the anatomy, right? And I'm not gonna go down that hole right now in this video. In my elk hunting course, it's at pursuitwithcliff.com/elk. I dive super deep into that. You can go check it out. I'm not gonna dive into that now, but that's just the reality, right? We're dealing with, you know, shrinking and expanding vital zones based on the angles of the animal. But on this quartering to shot like this, it is tiny, right? Because you have to imagine hitting that far side lung, but getting behind this bone right here, right? This is where the bone is. And really, literally, if you essentially aimed at that bone and just like prayed for proper deflection where it just went straight through the elk, you're probably still going to miss that far side lung. There's literally no overlap giving you that double lung vital shot. Now, just to clarify this, with a rifle, you still got it. Boom, right there. Crush bone, crush both lungs, dead bull. Maybe even a little bit further, right? Crush both lungs, both shoulders broken. Bull goes less than 20, 30 yards, right? So it's a good rifle shot. It's not a good bow shot because it's just a different type of projectile. It's a whole different wound channel deal. The thing is completely different, right? But this right here is basically an unshootable bull with archery equipment for all the reasons we talked about. So I do want to kind of give it as like a hard stop there. But now let's talk about the high shoulder shot. Let's go back to our other bull. All right, guys, the rifle hunter's glorious high shoulder shot, right? You, of course, don't want to do this if you're archery hunting. There's too much bone. It doesn't make a lot of sense. The idea with a rifle shot is you're going to hit that high shoulder. You're going to break both shoulders. Very little good meat loss because you're in that like kind of thin scapula of the animal. You're under the backstrap. Boom, broken shoulders, dead bull, punctured both lungs. Everybody's happy, right? Stuck right there. No tracking job. Theoretically, that's great, and it does work. I'm not here to say that it doesn't work. The problem is when I tell somebody the high shoulder shot, what does that mean? Well, intuitively, what it means is the top 1/3 of the bull's shoulder. To me, that would be the high shoulder shot, right? So say this is the top third, somewhere in here, okay? So I'm gonna aim like right there. That's the high shoulder shot on a bull, right? If you describe that to somebody. The true high shoulder shot, if that's what you want to take and you want that shoulder breaking shot, is actually like in here. It's almost like midway down the bull, and it's going to be a little bit forward here to make sure you can try to hit both shoulders. That, of course, you're going to adjust a little bit on how the quarter is, right? Like how the bull's quartering. But it's not in the top third. It's more like at 60%. That's the high shoulder shot. The problem is people go up here to the top third. This is a major issue because we revert to this concept of not recovering bulls that we hit exactly where we're aiming. So when we look at this, I shoot right here, right? And then I'm gonna have a group around that point of aim, right? So I shoot right here and then I get a little bit unlucky and then I get a shot right here. Well, you know, some people are going to say, well, that's still going to hit his shoulder. It's still going to be a high shoulder shot, break his both shoulders. The problem is most people don't understand the anatomy of the bull right here. And this is a huge one, right? Because bull elk have a hump, essentially. And the first backstrap you take off a bull elk, or if you've cleaned a bunch of bull elk and you haven't noticed this in the past, be diligent about the next time when you're stripping a backstrap off. Because what you'll find is right where the ribeyes are on a bull elk, right above the shoulders, that is the tallest part of the backstrap. It's like 2, almost 3 times the height of anywhere else on the backstrap, right? And that's the exact area where we're talking this high shoulder shot is, right here, right? So let me show you that with actual bones because I think it's very interesting. All right, guys, so here we're looking at the skeleton of a bull. You can see this depicted very clearly. So right here would be the top of the scapula, and then you can see these tall vertebrae. That's where that backstrap, just muscle. There's nothing there vascular, nothing in terms of vital organs that's going to kill the bull. I don't know why this is the case, but sometimes you get lucky and you hit those tall vertebrae and it'll actually kill the animal. I have found several bulls that were dead and they were dead on impact, hit right there, usually right above the spinal column, right? So it didn't sever the spinal cord, but it hit there and must have just like, the torque on the spine must have just like cut the spinal cord or whatever, but it paralyzed the animal or just straight up killed them, right? But that's usually not the norm. What I see here is I see hits, I see bulls hit the deck, and then I see them get up, and if they get away without getting shot again, they are not recovered, right? Because you're hitting a non-vital section of the animal. So if you don't get lucky in there, they're gonna get away, right? And you're thinking you're taking that high shoulder shot and you're not because of that anatomy. Now, sometimes you're lucky because you hit the spine and they'll be dead on impact, right? Or they'll be paralyzed on impact, which is not ideal because you have to shoot the animal again, but they're not going to get away. You're going to recover them in both of those scenarios. Now, if you shoot slightly below the spine, you're going to kill them because you're going to go through both the lungs of the animal. Now, I have to comment here because there's two different scenarios you will have elk hunters tell you happened on bulls they didn't recover that I think this anatomy explains. One, you'll hear people say, oh, I saw the bullet go through both lungs. That bull ran away. I hit the high void. I hit above the lungs. So that doesn't make any sense. And the reason is that if a bullet goes into the diaphragm, goes through near side lung, medium sternum, and then into far side lung, both lungs are going to collapse. That bull's going to be dead, and he's going to be dead somewhere pretty close. A lot of times it's a little tricky because maybe he goes 180 yards, 200 yards because you're getting lung collapse, and that might be slower than just total destruction of the lungs, right? But that bull's dying, and he's going to die fairly close. But because you have that high hit, you may not have any blood, right? So most likely in those scenarios, that bull is stone cold dead within 200, 250 yards, and the guys just didn't find him, right? So the bull is dead there. It's not like he took a shot in this high void and didn't die from it. The bull is dead. So you see that a lot. Also, sometimes when people say this high void thing, actually what they've done is they've shot through the backstrap, and for whatever reason, it didn't knock the bull down. Maybe they went right in between some of those vertebrae, right? When the muscle's on there, those vertebrae are not laying against each other. There is material, flesh between those vertebrae that a bullet could go through, and in that case you don't get the knockdown that you see in the scenario other times. So people think they're double lunging the bull, they think it was a good shot, but they actually shoot right through the backstrap, or they shoot right through the high cavity of the diaphragm. The bull goes and doesn't bleed. Explains a lot of some of these things that you hear that are just myths on unrecovered bulls. It's this anatomy right here that fools people. And if we go back to looking at a bull, we have to understand that what exacerbates this even worse on this high shoulder shot is we've got that hump, right, of the backstrap, and you can imagine the spinal column of this bull comes down here, and then it actually goes like this, and then comes out here to his tail dock, right? But there's this mass right here. What makes it even worse in terms of judging it as a shooter, if you've ever caped a bull, when you're going down their back line, as you get to where this hump is, that hair is still really long, but right after the hump, it gets very thin. And the hide is the same way. The hide is very thick. You get through the hump, and then all of a sudden that hide gets thinner and the hair gets thinner. So to exacerbate, where you're aiming or incorrectly aiming on the animal, you have to understand that there's backstrap, and then there's also 1.5 inches of thicker hide and longer hair, right? So you have to remember that all this is pushing this downward. Just to depict this a little bit better, even we can go back to our application, our little shooting simulation application, and you can see this. I think I can probably zoom in and you might be able to see it here. But you can see here's the spinal column, right, going right down through here, up here, and you guys may not be able to see it on the video, but you can see these tall vertebrae in here, right? So if you hit anywhere in here, you're shooting a high shoulder shot and you shoot right here, you're gonna hit that backstrap and you're gonna not recover that bull, because that bull, there's no reason he's gonna die, right? It's almost a flesh wound. Like he might, of course it's not good. He's got a big wound channel from a rifle bullet there. It's not great for his health, but he could go miles, he could go days, could go weeks with that wound. It's gonna be very hard to recover that bull. So just keep that in mind, that's how that spinal column goes right there. So if you're taking the high shoulder shot, the real high shoulder shot's like right here, right? Like right in here, this area. So it's at like 60% on the bull, right? 60% up. It should be called mid shoulder shot, right? Like right there, that's the high shoulder shot. Like right there, that's the high shoulder shot. This is a shitty shot. That's not the high shoulder shot. This is the high shoulder shot. Basically, it's the shot that I showed you when we were talking about a quartering to bull, the rifle shot I would take, right? So it's really all the same shot. And so just keep that in mind. Again, it's a thing about understanding the anatomy, visualizing it, and you're going to kill more animals that are recoverable. And that's what we're shooting for here. All right, guys, so I hope you found this useful. Some key takeaways here. One, always have my voice in the back of your head, particularly if you're archery hunting. Cliff says they're almost never broadside. Let that resonate in your mind, because then you'll second guess what you're looking at and you'll realize the bull's not broadside, and you'll adjust the quartering to that slight quartering to where you still have an ethical shot, but you're gonna shoot in the right spot, right? You're gonna recover bulls that you hit in the right spot. And that's the key of this whole video, right? We're talking about just aiming in the right spot. It's so sad if you hit exactly where you're aiming, your marksmanship is perfect, all that practice pays off, you hit exactly where you're aiming, and then you don't recover the bull because you're aiming at the wrong spot. And that's just a lapse of judgment. So keep that one in mind for sure, and always think about where that anatomy is regardless of the position of the bull, all right? And then on the rifle front, always remember that big backstrap there. The idea of high voiding an animal and the animal runs off into Never Never Land and survives a shot that goes through the diaphragm, that's complete bullshit. The idea that you've double lunged a bull with a rifle or an arrow and somehow it magically survived, again, almost certainly bullshit. I'm sure there's these magical exceptions that just happen and animals survive. That is the case. They survive odd things. So it's not completely bullshit, but for the most part it is, right? Usually what's happening is you're backstrapping the animal. So remember, there's that big high backstrap on these animals. It's all about just thinking about it, guys. That's the low-hanging fruit on getting a chunk of those animals back that otherwise you would never recover. It's just about understanding that. So guys, I hope this was useful to you. If you want more in depth on this, check out my full elk course. I go totally dork mode, way beyond this dork mode, on shot placement, frontals, everything, right? Archery and rifle. pursuitwithcliff.com/elk. It's all there. Go check it out. It's a mind dump of mine, right? But if you just want some more free stuff, there's a ton of knowledge on my YouTube channel, including this one, an overview of the wind and hunting elk, exactly how an elk uses it to their advantage, and how you, once you understand it, will start killing way more elk. So guys, I'll catch you later. Thanks for watching.